We're also seeing a lot of family facilitated trafficking where parents and uncles and cousins and siblings are trafficking, their relatives in order to get money for other things, which sounds extra scary to me. So we're not seeing, people come over in big container ships. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing Chatham County girls being trafficked by people who are coming into Chatham County and also trafficked by residents of Chatham County. So now we're going to watch a short video. It's about 4 minutes long. It's going to give an overview about trafficking. And this video was made in the state of Florida. So it says our state being Florida. Obviously, we're not in Florida, but with us being in such close proximity, so much of it is so relevant to us. And this will discuss human trafficking and sex trafficking a little bit. So if a parent decides that their child should listen to this, that's totally okay. You can just step from the room and have to look at the video, but it's totally up to your discretion. All right, we're ready for the video, Rachel. Rachel, can you turn it up or down subtitles? The money sold for goods, sold for services, exchanged for something for profit. It's very dehumanizing. It's one of the greatest tragedies of our time.
Human trafficking is modern day slavery. It's not just an urban issue, it's everywhere. It's way too prevalent and it's under the surface. And it's something that people must know about.
Human trafficking is an epidemic. 20 to 40 million people are affected by this crime around the world. But this issue is not just a global crisis. This is happening here on U.S. soil. It is a crime that is difficult to trace, and the numbers we have are just the tip of the iceberg. But here are some facts to consider. Since 2007, there have been over 62,000 victims that have been affected by human trafficking in the United States alone. The top 3 states affected are California, Texas, and Florida. Florida is number 3, and our population is only growing. But what is human trafficking? What does it look like? One common type is labor trafficking. Labor trafficking is when individuals are forced to perform labor or services against their will.
They put people into jobs, very low pay, make deals with the employers to get the labor at a very cheap rate.
The Polaris report names Tampa as a major hub for a human trafficking pipeline that starts in Asia.
It's not the job they were promised. They're not paid a base wage. They don't know the language.
We do have a considerable problem here in Florida because of the nature of some of our industries. For example, agriculture. We also have the hospitality industry where there are hotels that employ seasonal workers. There are many private residences that employ childcare workers, cooks, nannies. The most known type of human trafficking is sex trafficking. This is when someone is sold and is forced to perform sexual acts against their will.
Women tell me they were lured to Miami only to find themselves commercially exploited for sex. The booty, tourism, and sex entertainment industries in South Florida create what investigators call a perfect storm for human trafficking.
By definition, the federal law states that if you have forced fraud or coercion, that's eligible to immediately prove human trafficking has occurred. The exception is when it's minor children. When it's anybody under the age of 18 and involved in a sex act, they are not capable of consent. So we do not need that particular provision to prove the allegation. Many believe human trafficking is something that is only happening outside of our communities, in the cities, in the dark, where nobody can see. But it is happening here in plain sight, in our neighborhoods, schools, malls, restaurants, places where you are often at yourself.
This latest crackdown, dubbed Operation No Tricks, No Treats, lasted a week and a half and hauled in a whopping 277 people, the biggest single catch the Polk County Sheriff's Office has ever made. There are doctors, a resident at Lakeland Regional Health, a teacher at Lake Academy in Hillsborough County, and a pharmacist.
This is happening in our community. 300,000 U.S. children are at risk for trafficking per year, And each year, the number of human trafficking cases in the country is increasing.
Human trafficking. All right, so what is human trafficking? So that video gave a great synopsis of what it is, but it's the exploitation of another person for sex, labor, or services. And this is a highly profitable global industry. It generates about $150 billion a year. So clearly it is a problem worldwide. We'll talk more about why it's a problem here as well. All right, so we don't have to say it out loud, we're just gonna think about it in our head. But what type of person do you imagine when you think of somebody who is, victimizing these victims? Next slide. So this is a picture of people who are arrested for being traffickers. So obviously we see men, we see women, we see older people, younger people, people of a variety of different races. There's not one look of a trafficker is the importance of this slide. Really anybody can be a victim of human trafficking and anybody can also be a perpetrator of human trafficking. So I read a statistic recently that women make up about 15% of people who commit different types of crimes, but for trafficking, they make up about 30% of the offenders. So women can definitely be traffickers. This picture only shows men that are traffickers, but as we saw in the last slide, and as we talked about, women can also be traffickers. So a trafficker is somebody who exploits another individual with force, fraud, or coercion to make them perform commercial sex or work, and this person is facilitating sexual abuse. And in the video, we talked about somebody under 18 cannot consent. But what they were specifically talking about, that someone under 18 cannot consent to be sold for sex or sold for work. So even if in fact that's just for, okay, I'll give you dinner if you do this certain thing for me, that would be trafficking. So now we're going to do a little true false. Y'all feel free to answer. If not, I'll tell you what the answer is. But if y'all want to, tell me what you think, if it's true or false, that would be awesome. Okay, so true or false, only women and girls can be victims of human trafficking. Right, thank you. Awesome. So boys can also be victims of human trafficking. From a personal experience, my uncle was actually a victim of human trafficking. And he was a guy and he was under the age of 18. So it does happen. It's happening here in Savannah. So in the state of Georgia, we only have 55 residential shelter beds, as I was telling some people earlier, and there are none for boys in the state of Georgia. And that's mostly because there's not enough, workforce to support one of these facilities, but also there are not as many male victims. But we'll talk about Judge Formey in a moment. She runs Hope Court in the juvenile department. She actually spoke about male victims recently and said that, boys are often told not to come forward, or often told not to cry, to repress their emotions and things like that. So we think that the cases of male victims are vastly unreported. But males can be victims of human trafficking. Next slide. Okay, all children who are trafficked know that they are being trafficked and want to escape. Right, so that is false. So actually I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there was a case recently where some parents were trafficking their 5 and 6-year-old children to demand that they were supposed to be making car payments to. There's no way that those 5 and 6-year-olds would know that they need to escape, So it's just important to know that all victims won't ask for help because oftentimes they don't know what human trafficking is. They don't know, that they're being victimized. So true or false, human trafficking can happen anywhere, big cities, rural areas, etc. True. So we know it's happening in Savannah. I'll give some statistics later. It's also happening in Atlanta. Atlanta actually ranks second in the country for highest number of trafficking cases in the nation. So just us being in such close proximity is an issue. It's happening in Atlanta, it's happening in Savannah, it's happening abroad, and it's happening in all the little towns all over Georgia. So true or false, traffickers only target victims that they do not know. Right, so actually the majority of victims are targeted by traffickers that they do know. It could just be an acquaintance, someone who you meet just at a store and you frequently see them. It could be parents, like that other story I told. So it really is usually traffickers are targeting victims that they don't know. I mean, I'm sure that there have been victims who have been pumping gas and somebody runs up behind them and takes them away. I'm sure that does happen, but that's not the majority of cases. The majority of cases are victims being trafficked by people that they do know. So true or false, traffickers prey on vulnerabilities of their victims, such as being poor, having a disability, or living in a conflict zone. True, so that's definitely true. So what are some factors that y'all think could make someone vulnerable to human trafficking? Like what are some things? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yes, that's a huge one, and especially with, so many people being on social media, low self-esteem is a huge thing. Rachel, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, okay, one more. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so homelessness and poverty are a huge one. It's said that about 60% of minor victims of human trafficking are actually runaway or homeless youth. So it's definitely important, to be a trusted adult, be a trusted friend to everyone to ensure that, they're protected from this issue. So lack of education, so that could be lack of a high school diploma or also lack of education about human trafficking. In the story that I told about those parents trafficking their children, the children obviously didn't have an education about human trafficking. But once you get to a certain age, it's so important to talk to your children about this issue to, protect them from potential victimization. So for employment opportunities, I'm sure that y'all all got strange Instagram DMs or people messaging you on TikTok or weird emails that are saying, oh, you model for me, I'll give you $500. And sometimes maybe that is really modeling, but oftentimes it's someone trying to victimize you. So we'll talk more about social media and trafficking in a moment. So sexual and physical abuse, age, obviously the younger you are, the more vulnerable you are to this. Family history of drug use, LGBTQ+, so if your family doesn't accept you for your sexuality, you may be more likely to run away, which kind of goes into the runaway homeless youth. Lack of support networks, a lot of victims of human trafficking often say that they felt like they didn't have someone in their corner. They didn't have someone, who they could go to when they had an issue. So being that trusted adult, being that trusted friend is so important. History of systems involvement, so that can be DFACS or the foster care system, disabilities, and then, as you said, low self-esteem, self-confidence, or self-worth. And that's a huge one because traffickers can say, oh, you're beautiful, oh, I would love to buy you new clothes, come over to my house, things like that. And it's just one. Right? So how does this relate to me? So the number of 10 to 17-year-olds involved in trafficking in the United States each year likely exceeds 250,000. So just statistically, it's happening here. It's happening in Georgia. It's happening, all across the United States. As I said, about 60% of victims are runaway homeless youth. And traffickers actually, 1/3 of teen runaway youth will be approached by a trafficker within 2 days of leaving home. That's a really scary statistic to me because traffickers know exactly which children to target. They know exactly, who to look out for. And often runaway homeless youth will, meet other runaway homeless youth who have already been in contact with the trafficker. I mean, if somebody is offering you shelter and food and you're homeless, I mean, it just clearly makes sense that a child or even an adult would accept, something like that, but then it turns into more. They can be potentially victims of trafficking. And also, 40% of victims are family facilitated. I mentioned that earlier, but I did want to reiterate that. So the average age at which girls first become victims of human trafficking is 12 to 14, and for boys and transgender youth, that's 11 to 13. So it's really that late middle school, early high school population. So trying to talk to these, children before they go into high school is really important, but just, having an open conversation like we're having tonight about this issue is really the biggest protective factor you can have for yourselves and your community and your kids as well. And as I said earlier, traffickers are using online recruitment to find victims. So as you can imagine, during COVID, we were mostly inside. We weren't, out in the community. Traffickers weren't able to, meet children in parks or in the malls and things like that. So they really turned to the internet. So online recruitment increased 22% during COVID. That was a 125% increase on Facebook and a 95% increase on Instagram. So clearly, it's such a problem. And so I give these presentations often in schools, and I ask people to raise their hand if they use the internet every day. And every student raises their hand. Everybody uses the internet every day. And then I ask them to raise their hand if they received a strange direct message on Instagram, and everybody also raises their hand. So it's so easy to contact people on the internet. So just Having private social media is really important, and making sure you don't let people follow you who you don't know, just trying to be as safe as possible is the best thing you can do. So being online really equalizes risk factors. So before, runaway homelessness were obviously at risk, but people who had, a high level of education or a lot of wealth, they kind of weren't at risk for human trafficking. But now, because of online, everybody is pretty much open to being contacted by a trafficker. So anyone is really could be possibly victimized. So here's an ad that the FBI actually found to lead to human trafficking. So obviously, maybe as adults, we can look at that and say, oh yikes, that looks really fake. I would never respond to something like that. But if you're maybe 13 years old and you're very low on money and you have, low self-esteem or something like that, you might contact somebody who's posting an ad like this. So just again, online safety, talking to your children about making sure that they're being safe online, they're not contacting people they don't know is a huge, huge thing. So now we're going to watch a short video about, it's not a real video, it's a dramatization of a girl who gets messaged on Instagram about being a model, and then it quickly turns into something else. So it's about 2 minutes long.
Hey, Jessica?
Hey, are you Brian?
Yeah, the studio just walked away. You want to go on? Yeah, the picture's a few years old, but anyway, let's go. Come on.
Okay, so what are some red flags that she should have, seen before? Right, she didn't know him. She should have, talked to someone online who she didn't know him. Right. Yeah. And she also, he didn't look like his picture. That should have been another red flag. There are a lot of red flags, but again, like in that situation, if you're a teenager and you're thinking that you're going to be a model, and that might have been your dream or something like that. It's just, don't go with people who you find. Make sure, and if you have to, for any reason, go with someone. Don't go by yourself. Don't meet people online that you don't know. It's true. So what are some things you can look out for just as a community member to protect yourself and others from human trafficking? So these are some signs that victims of human trafficking have been found to have. So if you're malnourished, signs of physical injury, rehearsed responses in social interactions. So that's if someone won't respond to you unless the adult they're with or the person they're with gives them the all clear to respond to you, or answers completely for them. That can be a big red flag. If a child is checking into a hotel with a significantly older male that they seem to not know, that's a big red flag. Tattoos and branding on the neck or back, you'll see a picture of that in a moment. Poor physical or dental health, and then lacking identification documents like an ID or a passport or birth certificate. And also another one that we're seeing frequently in schools, and I'm sure being a church community, seeing each other very frequently, this could be one for y'all too. But if a child doesn't seem to ever have their hair brushed, they never seem to have the clothes they need, they always seem to be hungry, but then all of a sudden they have an iPhone and their hair is done and their nails are done, that's a huge red flag because traffickers often, love bomb these children and give them, everything that they've ever wanted. end up victimizing them later. So that's a big one in the schools and in the church that we can really look for. So here's some examples of the tattoos and branding that I was discussing. So obviously some people will have tattoos like this and not be victims of human trafficking, but if they have these tattoos and also present with some of the other signs that we talked about, that can be a big red flag. So those are two examples. Also, sometimes I'll have the words daddy or things like that on the tattoos. Often these are found on the neck or the back, the chest, the inside of the wrist, and oftentimes we've heard recently on the inside of the leg. So these are mostly in hidden locations and hard to see if this is one of the things that traffickers do to their victims. So do y'all think Savannah has a human trafficking problem? Definitely. So there's a couple reasons why Savannah has a human trafficking problem. Excellent. Thank you. So poverty is a big one. Obviously, there's a huge wealth gap in Savannah. We have an extremely rich population and an extremely poor population. So that puts us at risk for human trafficking. Also, youth homelessness, as we said, 60% of victims of minor victims of human trafficking are runaway homeless youth. The tourism industry is also a huge one. Look at International Port, that I-95, I-16 corridor, and the Market Arena. Just any place where a lot of people are coming in and out puts people at risk for human trafficking. And again, a lot of the people think that International Port is a risk because people are bringing, women from other countries in big container ships or something like that. But that's not really what we're seeing. We're seeing, just locations with a lot of people trafficking the children that are already in Chatham County. So we're not seeing, people brought in through the ports. So also proximity to Atlanta, as I said, for a while, Atlanta was the #1 place in the nation for highest rates of human trafficking. Right now it's #2, which is a little better than #1, but not much better. So it's still clearly a problem. And we're so close to Atlanta. And then also proximity to Florida, as we saw in the video, Florida ranks 3rd in the state for highest number of cases of trafficking. And just being in such close proximity is really a problem. Miami is actually one of the top locations in the country for human trafficking. So Chatham County ranks 7th in the state for a number of sex trafficking cases of minors. And in 2021, there were 494 minors with an average age of 14 that were identified as trafficking victims. And actually, those were last year's statistics. 2022 just came out a couple of days ago. Chatham County now ranks 4th in the state for number of sex trafficking cases of minors. So it's going up, and now there are over 700 minors in Georgia that were identified as trafficking victims. So it's so important, again, to talk about this issue, to make sure we know it's an issue in order to protect ourselves and our children as well. So Hope Court is a juvenile court in Savannah. It's a rehabilitation court. So nobody who goes through Hope Court will be prosecuted at all. Next slide, please. It's run by Judge Roxanne Corby, and she helps, children who have been victimized by traffickers get back into the community. So she helps them, get their GED or go back to school or, get a job, get job training, things like that. So it's a great program that the city of Savannah has. A lot of cities don't have this. I believe this is one of the few in the nation. I want to say there are more than 5 of these types of courts. So the fact that Savannah has this really shows how much of a problem we have. And the Department of Justice just gave Tharros Place a grant to open our residential facility. So the federal government realizes that human trafficking is a problem here, and we also realize it as community members. So what are some things that y'all can do as community members? Being vigilant, so remembering the signs of human trafficking that I mentioned, and watching out for each other is huge. I have some cards on the table up here that y'all are welcome to get after the presentation. It has, the signs of human trafficking, some risk factors, things like that, just to keep in mind. Spreading awareness, talking to your friends, classmates, group members, talking to your church members, just having conversations like this is the biggest protective factor we can have over this communication. So I know you don't always want to tell your parents where you're going, and sometimes, you don't want your parents to do Find My iPhone on you and stuff like that. But just being in communication with your parents about where you're going. A lot of parents say, oh, I thought my kid was just going to their friend's house, and it turns out they were actually being trafficked because they were going to their trafficker's house instead. So just being aware where your children are is so important. And talking to someone if you have a problem. There's no problem that's too small. If you think if you have the uh-oh feeling, as my mom always said, if you feel like something is off, you should definitely reach out to a trusted adult just to, voice that concern. There's no problem that's too small. So stay informed. So we have an email list that y'all are welcome to join, and we send out information about human trafficking. And then the Department of Justice also has a really great newsletter to spread awareness. And you can also register for training. Rachel and I recently did a course for free online. It's about 3 hours. And you can learn more about human trafficking in the state of Georgia if you want to, be more aware. And I think the biggest thing that I want to take from the presentation is just being a trusted friend, being a trusted adult. A lot of victims of human trafficking said they really didn't feel like they had someone in their corner. And if they did, maybe that wouldn't have happened to them. If they had someone to go to ask questions to, that they might not have been victimized. So being that trusted adult, being that trusted friend that's there in your church universe, is there for your children, your friends, anyone like that. It's a huge thing. So now we have our last video. It's about 3 minutes long. It's called Faces of Human Trafficking. It's by the Office of Victims of Crime. And I know we saw that slide earlier of the traffickers, and we were talking about how there's no one look of the trafficker. There's also not one look of a victim. A victim can be anyone. There are older people that are victims, younger people that are victims, people of all different races, ages. So, anybody is susceptible to this. So being aware is a huge thing. And, all working together as a community with law enforcement, with church members and nonprofits and teachers, to, eradicate this problem as quickly as possible is so important. So we're ready for the video, Rachel. Thank you.
My trafficker was my husband. There was no way I could reach out to anybody for help.
We're scared. We're scared to run. We're scared to tell anybody what's going on.
It was an incredibly violent situation. I felt like there was no way I could get out.
The traffickers can be just about anyone from any walk of life. A lot of the trafficking involves domestic servitude, hoteliers, restaurant owners of massage parlors, agricultural farm owners.
It can be a trafficker who tells a woman, I love your boyfriend, I love you, if you love me, you're going to go out and have sex with money. It can be psychological like that, or it can be more overt, more physical. It can be hitting, abusing, keeping them away from any support systems.
Trafficking doesn't know nowadays. The victim could be male, female, transgender, anyone. And it happens all over America.
I still see this attitude of it's just immigrants or it's just people in other countries. It happens to U.S. citizens so much more than people are aware.
The natural stakeholders in this issue are certainly law enforcement, legal advocates, social service providers. There's other players involved as well.
It is important to education of the community because victims often don't self-identify. They don't come forward to law enforcement.
So it's something in the community are the eyes and the ears.
It's medical workers, it's educators, it's personnel at homeless shelters.
We can't do this alone. No one has the capacity to provide every single thing that a victim or survivor of human trafficking needs.
There has to be a support system within the community, psychological counseling, shelter, and vocational education, so they can reintegrate, become a healthy individual.
There's an intentional effort to get everyone together so we know how to share resources, we know how to work together and make sure at the end of the day, a victim becomes a survivor.
All right, so we have 2 upcoming events that we'd love to have you all Join us, I know these are in the next 2 days, but we have a lot of events coming up soon. So we have our Spring Civic Trafficking Stakeholder event. We have 2 a year, actually. So there'll be another one in the fall. It's a great event to attend. You know, lunch will be provided. It's tomorrow at Savannah Tax Expert Auditorium. If you'd like, please come speak to me after, and we'll save the date for y'all. We're also partnering with Savannah Record Theater for their production of Once, and a portion of their ticket sales Thursday night are going to go to Tharros Place. So if you're interested in either of those events, please let me know. We also have an email list if you're interested in coming to events, you know, in the future. All right, but if you'll have any further questions, please feel free to ask them, you know, in front of the group or come up to me after. But I also wanted to mention, so this is the human trafficking hotline number. So the state of Georgia is actually very unique in the fact that we have our own hotline number. So if you ever have concern, if you ever have a question about human trafficking, if you ever think someone you know may be a victim, you can call that hotline and get advice, and you can remain completely anonymous. So that's something the state of Georgia has, other states don't have. So if you ever need to call that, feel free. If you ever have any human trafficking questions, if you ever want to volunteer, please let me know. Once we open our facility, we will need a variety of volunteers, a variety of different, you know, experiences and things like that. So if y'all ever, you know, have any need to contact me, please feel free to do so. My information is Kate Thompson, Outreach Coordinator. So we also have a Facebook and Instagram if you'd like to follow us. But thank y'all so much. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for setting this up. I really appreciate your time. And I hope you learned something about human trafficking. And please feel free to take some of these cards with the signs of human trafficking, just, you know, to remember that in the future if you need. Thank y'all. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I can like that too.
And if you're curious about the stakeholder event one, we also have printouts with that as well. That you need that.
We want to have the same thing, something that they just have a takeaway.
Yeah.
Something. Anything that's learned in this regular takeaway.
One thing that someone learned. Even, yeah.
I love that, for that.
Yeah, traffickers often give tattoos to their victims, but not everybody who has a tattoo is a victim of human trafficking. Yeah, people can have tattoos and not be victims of human trafficking, but sometimes traffickers do put us down. Yes. Right, yes, if you ever have a feeling that you received a strange message or something, please either delete that, block them, and also talk to an adult about it. Did you have? Yeah, that was shocking to me too when I started, you know, researching stuff for this type of presentation. I didn't realize, you know, I would think that a family member would do that to, you know, someone related to them, but oftentimes that does happen. Yeah.
Which is the widespread, a lot we only have 55 beds in the entire state of Georgia. That's a little disheartening. The slide indicated that in 2021 was 400 something. And I believe the number is up to 700.
It is.
What can we do to get larger facilities, you know, what can we do
Right.
Apparently, you know, we need more than 12 beds.
Exactly. Yes, no, that was a great question. Yeah, talking to representatives about this issue, I think people just don't realize that human trafficking is as big of a problem as it is. You know, we're gonna have an annual budget of $1 million, you know, for our facilities. So just things like that, it's just expensive to run. And although we definitely need it, it's hard to, you know, get the funds for these types of facilities, and also legally having so many minors in one building is hard as well to get rid of the legal documents all straightened out. So that's why a lot of the facilities have to max out at 12, because they just legally cannot have more children than that. And you also can't have, many facilities can't have for men and women or girls and boys and things like that. So I wish there was just a way to, have a college-sized dorm with all the, but then again, if you have too many victims in one place or too many survivors, and then they'll, maybe start spiraling to what happened to them before, things like that. So it is hard, but we definitely need more. So I think awareness is the biggest thing that we can do to try to get the word out there. Yeah. Right, so that's a great question. So in Chatham County recently, there was a case of a girl who was trafficked and needed a facility to go to. She actually had to go to Maine because there were no facilities close to here. So we're going to hopefully take mostly, Chatham County girls to keep them in an area, but there might be, girls from far away coming to our facility. But when we run out of beds, they'll have to be sent to other facilities across the nation. Sometimes the victims of human trafficking can actually go back to their families if they want to. I mean, if they weren't trafficked by their family member, they may want to stay at home, and then they wouldn't necessarily need their residential bed. So some victims will, go there, but many will need residential facilities, and they're just isn't the space to have that. Yes. Right. No, that's a great question. I think just, so we work very closely with the courts, with the Juvenile Justice Department in Savannah. We also work closely with the Department of Family and Child Services. So I think just having community partners and having, governmental partners. I know different chairmen have come to our events, and I'm hoping the mayors can get more involved with everything. Yeah, and the Department of Justice gave us the grant, so I think just getting, more people involved will give us more validation for the survivors.
Field, counselors, psychologists who are working in that field.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're gonna need volunteers to, help run activities, maybe somebody's a musician and wants to, lead a little guitar learning class or something, or somebody's a dancer and wants to, teach a dance or yoga instructor. So we're not exactly sure what we need specific volunteers for, but it's kind of, the girls are going to be living there all the time, so they'll need activities to fill their time. So I think just anybody who's willing to volunteer, if somebody's willing to volunteer to cook spaghetti for dinner one night, I'm sure we would totally be open to that type of thing. So really just whatever the volunteer is willing to give. I know we're going to have a big landscaping project coming up, so people are into gardening and stuff, we might want them to come out to it. So there's going to be a variety of different volunteers. But I'll put a little sign up sheet if anybody wants to be added to our volunteer list. We'd love to have volunteers.
My thing for me is that Savannah ranks number 7 in the nation. We need to be mindful. Youngsters, we take a lot of things for granted. And I'm not saying anything that's going to happen, but we have St. Patrick's Day, we have parade. People are out there. We also have concerts that she mentioned stuff. People are out there, even at school, even at the mall. We're always on our phones, doing this, not paying attention. Always so social, so friendly, not knowing people. We need to be mindful and know the signs. And if you see something, know something, I think, and just say something to somebody, I'd rather help somebody than ignore it and later found out that she said something.
Definitely. Yeah, our executive director just wrote an article for, I think it's the Savannah Morning News, about how human trafficking and St. Patrick's Day are still interconnected. So many people are going to be coming here.
And another thing, also being out on River Street, also the city market, all those type places that we just take for granted that we just actually go to because of the fact that we just want to be out there. We need to be mindful of what's going on in our surroundings and everything. And like she was saying, you talk to her, ask questions. Also being here in church, whether Sunday school, the YPD or whatever, talking to the pastor, we need to make sure that we have someone to talk with we need to, all right? So we're here for you.
When we go give these presentations in schools, we ask all the students, think of one person who you go to, right? Whether it's your older sibling or your parent or your grandmother or your pastor, anyone, just have someone in mind who you would trust enough to go to them if you had an issue like this.
Well, on behalf of here at the website, for coming out and keeping messages for think of
everyone. So I present, thank you so very much for coming. Let me apologize for having a little business, but thank you for coming. This is a very, very, very worthwhile, subject. And I appreciate it was a great one, and I know I really appreciate it and accept it. We live in a society, as you said, it's always that there are some evil people doing evil things. And the fact of the matter is that evil people will do evil things until Jesus comes back again for us. But in the meantime, we must do all we can to make sure that we are educating each other and educating ourselves. So human trafficking is a big problem. When I read in the paper, when it comes to Savannah, Georgia, it is rough. We know that it is rough. So it's everywhere. I'm sure you've heard that already. But thank you all for participating. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for coming and for organizing this. Everyone who has worked with you, I thank you very much. To our Sunday school superintendent who is here with us, also Sister Shawn with us, our missionary president.
Well, I just need to step
Okay, thank you, Sister Shawn. I see Sister Tanja, Sister Hamilton, worked very closely with our young people as well as other individuals. Sister Amber, thank you all so very much. To all our trustees and stewards, thank you so very much for making this this day happen. Because I know that it is a blessing to everyone who took part.
And we want to do a picture.
Yes. Yes, we want to do a picture. We want everybody. I'm going to put the lights on. Yeah, I'm going to put the lights on so we can make sure we got the light of the picture. We want everybody.
They don't.